and welcome to our weekly discussion video following along with our daily Bible readings. We're still in the book of Exodus, but before we get started, I just want to share a word. Pastor Josh was meant to be out of town this week on the UMCOR mission trip to Louisiana, but unfortunately, he's had to travel to Kentucky to be with family as they mourn the passing of his grandfather. So be in prayer for Pastor Josh and his family as they travel a bit this week, and just know that he's thinking about us and appreciates all of our thoughts and our prayers. As I said, our readings are still us going through the book of Exodus, and I want to ask a strange question as we get started. Do you remember what it was like to be a kid, maybe on a Saturday morning or getting home from school, and you're wanting to rush off and play and hang out with friends, and your parents go into this litany of rules and chores and jobs you have to do before you get to have your fun? I imagine this is a little bit how the Israelites would have felt. They were led out of Egypt, they were excited, and almost immediately were faced with the harsh reality of life as their own people group. We've read how they were hungry, we've read how they were hot and they were lost, but we've also read about great provision that comes from God, directly followed by this long list of rules that God gives them, this law saying, this is how I expect you to act as you follow me through the wilderness and I bring you into your promised future and your promised land. I imagine also this is fairly similar to how God feels in dealing with the Israelites. He's trying to give them his rules, his laws, his guidances, but he knows by foreknowledge, but also in presence, that the Israelites are going to struggle. And so I want to start by saying that at the end of our readings for this week, we encounter what I think God is trying to use as a pick-me-up moment for the Israelites. At the end of chapter 29, we get God saying this: "So I will consecrate the tent of meeting," which is the subject to most of our most recent rules. "I will consecrate the tent of meeting and the altar, and I will consecrate Aaron and his sons to serve me as priests. Then I will dwell among the Israelites and be their God. They will know that I am the Lord their God, who brought them out of Egypt so that I might dwell among them. I am the Lord their God." This, I think, is a powerful reminder that the presence of the divine will dwell among the Israelites. And yes, there are some requirements, there are laws, but these are not meant to be a burden. They are privilege. They are a privilege because they are honored with the presence of God. And we see this periodically throughout all of the Old Testament, where God shows up in a powerful physical way saying, "Do not forget the blessing that is my presence." So at this point, we've seen the construction of the tent of meeting, instruction for corporate worship of the Israelites, and now we come to the rules of the ordination process, dictating and ensuring that the priests are set apart for the most sacred of work among God's people. Again, I think this is a moment of foreknowledge. God knows the burden that the Israelites will feel, and so sets apart a section of the Israelite population who are going to serve as the helpers of the Israelites, the leaders in the ruling of the law and the ordinances of God, so that they might have a priesthood helping them maintain that relationship with God in the physical. And so we see here the laws of consecration and ordination for the priesthood. Aaron and his sons will be set apart from the regular rank and file leadership of the Israelites, so that the Israelites will have help and guidance in maintaining that physical relationship with God. Peter uses similar language in the New Testament. In 1 Peter chapter 2, he says, "By our belief and profession of Christ, our acceptance of Christ as the cornerstone of our faith, we are members of a royal priesthood." This is meant to be a reminder in the New Testament that we no longer have to go through the hoops and the hurdles of the priesthood and the sacrifices and the atonement of the Old Testament, because Christ has already bought that for us. We get a relationship with the divine. God will dwell among us through the Holy Spirit, just as he dwelt with his people in the Old Testament in the tent of meeting. So what is the purpose then? Is it to look down or backwards at the Israelites? Or is it rather to privilege and honor ourselves, knowing that what was true for them is also true for us? 1 Peter gives us a clue to the answer. He goes on after mentioning the royal priesthood by saying that we, the Gentiles, have now been grafted into God's chosen people. Peter is calling us to remember the work, the powerful work that God did in the physical presence of the Israelites. He does that same work in our physical presence as well through the Holy Spirit. The specific rules we read this week, I think, challenge us to consider the relationship that we have with those in vocational ministry. There is this myth, I think, in our expression of Christianity that we have the clergy that oversee and carry out all of the ministry, and we just support it with our attendance. But those writings from Peter, I think, remind us that we are just now, as a member of the royal priesthood, as our pastors, as our other clergy persons who carry out the work of the church. And I think you even see this evidenced here in the Old Testament. There is evidence that suggests that the work of the priesthood was not possible without the population of the Israelites. We see that their garments are constructed with the very best resources, like gemstones and other fine materials, but also the skills of the Israelites. Their garments were woven by expert embroiderers. Their elements and instruments of worship are worked by expert engravers. Meaning, the very best talents of the Israelites, all the Israelites, were necessary to carry out the most holy of works. And in that way, the whole Israelite community would be challenged by saying, what and how do my skills, what place do they occupy in the work of atonement, in the work of the priests? So might we remember that our very best skills, be they labor, be they knowledge work, be they work of our presence, how can that be given back to God, not just through vocational ministry, but in support of all the missions of the church? Because at the end of the day, through our belief and profession of Jesus Christ, we are all ministers of his gospel. And this work, though contemplating the difference between the priesthood and those without, reminds us that the work of the presence of God, our interaction with the divine Holy Spirit, is precious, and we have the privilege of interacting with that Holy Spirit on the daily basis. Thank you again so much for joining us this week. I hope that something in these readings will call you to remember just a couple of things about your faith. One, that there are people among us who are doing the good work of the church, and we are to love and support the work that they are doing. But the other thing is that they are not to do it alone. We are all ministers of the gospel. And Peter would tell us that these writings are proof that the burden on all believers, the privilege for all believers, is the same. We are all members of the community of God who can feel his presence among us. Go this week and find time to attend to the ordinances of God. Remember that through prayer, through study and fellowship, you get to participate with the divine and experience that powerful presence and powerful promise, just like we see here in the book of Exodus for the Israelites. Go and have a great week and be blessed.